Hi everybody, thanks for joining us. We take a look at your weekend forecast. Update on our storm that's happening tonight into tomorrow, actually happening right now in the rain form, but it's going to get a lot more interesting late tonight into tomorrow morning as it changes from rain to snow, and also heavy rain. So yeah, all sorts of details to work out with this one. Relatively high impact event, particularly in Rutland and Bennington counties. We're going to get into why that is as we go forward. We got a lot to talk about, so let's just get going. All right, first of all, here is satellite imagery, and what you can see here is we're going to show a different satellite view in a second here, but what you can see is we're transporting moisture. We have a feed straight from the Gulf of Mexico straight up the East Coast, and we have significant deep cloud layer moving in our direction. We also have some upper level support to our west here, and as we look at this on another, you're actually going to see that this is kind of moving pretty quickly east, and this represents the colder air. And that's going to kind of beat the second wave, or at least come in at about the same time as the second wave of moisture. We can also see, you can kind of see a couple different ripples on the front. So you can kind of have a little bit of a bulge on the back here and a little bit of the break in the clouds. So here's kind of one area of low pressure along the front. And then we have a building area of low pressure down to the south as well. This will be the portion that comes up after the colder air moves through and gives us the chance of the snow tomorrow, or at least rain changing to snow after we get all rain out of the first part of the system. So if you're traveling today, Sunday, during the afternoon, even into the overnight, no problems anywhere, even the higher elevations in southern Vermont. I don't think anybody changes to snow north of Rutland. Maybe by midnight we start to change to snow, but we've got a long ways to go here where it's just rain. Nothing to worry about right now. We're below freezing temperatures are. You got to go out over the Great Lakes right now. We're going to take a look at that too. So if we look at visible satellite, I wanted to show you this one because what you can see here, you get the same cloud band here, but it shows the kind of low level moisture associated with the upper level low back to our west. You can kind of see it's moving pretty. While this system is not, while the overall front is not moving that fast, the colder air is starting to catch up, and it's actually going to, as the first system comes through, it's going to help drag a little bit more of it, and then the second system here to the south and west, or to our south and east, I should say, is really going to get going. And as it does, it's going to tap some of this cold air. It's not real cold, but just cold enough so that we get a quick change, or not a quick change, but a change to snow. Then how quickly that happens, exactly where it happens, what elevation it happens, will make a huge difference in snowfall totals and how impactful it is on the roads tomorrow. We're not going to flash freeze. At one point, it looked like it might crash in real quick with cold temperatures. We're gonna basically move in temperatures in the low 30s to upper 20s at the most tomorrow. So it's not going to flash freeze. So it's not going to get real like of a black ice kind of slick. But yeah, the system is just a lot going on. So here's our cold front that's actually bringing the cold. Here's the front of which there is lots of rain. So we've got a bunch of different low pressure systems. We kind of have one consolidating low here, one low here across basically western Pennsylvania now, one that's sort of stringing up north of us along the front. And with this, we're just streaming moisture up. And it's this one that's eventually going to take over, that is going to develop enough that it kind of cuts itself off from the rest of these lows. They're going to kind of race ahead. This one kind of sticks behind, and just enough that it starts to tap into this cold air behind us. Let's take a look at radar now closer in. You can see we're about to get into it, and by the time you see this, actually, I'm sure we will be into it with lots of rain. This radar comes from about noon, but if you see this in a couple hours, we'll be into this heavier rain here. Looks like we could have a little bit of a break before we really get into another batch of very heavy rain with the second system. There is some chance of some minor flooding. I think it's going to be minor. We're looking at 2.5 inches of total precipitation, maybe up to 3 in some locations. That's enough to cause some issues, particularly if you get a plugged culvert or something like that. It's not enough to cause widespread big-time issues. So we don't have to worry about that, but definitely some minor issues. And then how much of it falls as snow will also matter. And the fact that we don't have a lot of snowpack now, so there's a little bit of snow melt happening, but it's not a lot. And that the melting and all that kind of stuff and the runoff will kind of tend to slow down as we get colder, as we get into the backside of the system. But definitely pawning on the roads is going to be kind of a mess all the rest of the afternoon into the overnight. So as we look towards the surface, you can see here's our front, just to kind of show you one more time these different ripples of low pressure. And you can see this low pressure behind that wants to drag in the colder air. Let's take a look. I want to give you a little bit better of an idea. Here's the upper level support. Why is this storm to the south going to kind of explode? Well, here's our jet stream. And basically, the darker colors, and particularly these purples and whites, they are where there's faster wind speeds aloft. This is like at the higher parts of the atmosphere. And what happens here is this is going to kind of continue to move the trough right now. This is called a positively tilted trough because it's oriented where the north part of the trough is ahead of the southern part of the trough. The trough, and that means a progressive kind of system, which is why we kind of have the front now. What's going to happen is it's pivoting, and it'll go neutral, and then it's actually going to go negative because the northern part of this trough isn't really going to move that fast at the upper levels, but the bottom is going to swing through. And as that happens, that gives a lot more kind of curve in the right direction for a storm to form off across the southeast, and it also gives it slows everything down a little bit, so that last system gets time to really get rolling as it comes up the coast. And kind of develop as its own individual thing, as opposed to just being part of these systems that ride up the front. And so that's this system. So that's kind of the setup aloft. Also, you get the most vertical motion kind of when you've got a jet streak like this, we'd call it, where there's an area of amplified jet stream in the right entrance area or the left exit area, which is sort of back here. And what's going to happen is this comes around the bend. They're actually going to meet up. So you're going to have a right entrance and a left exit. It's hard to kind of see in the motion here, but that's going to happen, and that enhances vertical motion. That's where you get your very strong storm development. So we're going to go from having ripples of low pressure along our front to a developing pretty rapidly low pressure system. Now, the wind that we were worried about with this system is mostly going to go east of us. Eastern New England, mostly Maine, is where I'm really concerned about wind of 50, 60 miles an hour. We're going to see wind on the backside, and it'll be breezy, but 35 to 40, 45 mile an hour winds. That with the heavy snow could lead to some power outages, but it's not going to be the 40 to 50 mile an hour, 55 mile an hour winds I was worried about back when the storm developed a little differently back in the day. Whoops, so let's continue to move forward here. Here's temperatures, and here's what I'm talking about in terms of it's going to be a bit until we get to the colder air, right? Temperatures are above freezing all the way basically into Michigan. It's going to take, yes, this is on the move, but it's going to take a while for these temperatures. And we don't have a lot of cold temperatures right to our north, but we are already in mid-level starting to filter in some of that cooler air just to our west, and it is going to eventually make it down to the surface as we head through the overnight tonight. Let's take a look. We can do this now. Let's talk about snowfall. So what's going to happen is, I think by midnight-ish at some of the higher elevations, we start to move in some cold enough temperatures aloft that we get some change to snow. Now, what the models have been pretty consistent about, and I think this setup is right for, is that the track of the storm and the fact that we're going to get actually on the eastern part of the greens kind of downsloping. By the time the cooler air moves in, it's going to be coming down off the mountains, and that tends to actually hold how quickly you can cool at the surface. So this is not a normal forecast in a lot of ways, because a lot of times we would have our winds coming from the north and the east, but now it's going to be kind of the north and the west when we change over. And so the heavier snow often falls on the eastern side of the Green Mountains, but we're actually flipped for this. It's going to be on the western side of the Green Mountains and certainly up to the peaks. And then you're going to get some spillover, which is why Bennington and Rutland County end up with a lot more snow than areas in Windham and Windsor County. But these amounts are not, I would not, for 12 hours before or 18 hours before it changes to snow, I would not call these locked in at all, because it's going to be, we're going to be seeing incredibly heavy precipitation when this first starts over. We could get 2 or 3 inches of snow in an hour very easily tomorrow morning for a brief period of time before it starts to let up. So if you change an hour or two earlier than they think, these totals could go up by 6 inches. Or if you change a little bit too late, we could end up with a coating in all these places. So I'm going to put these numbers up. This is my best estimate at this point, but if you end up with a significant amount more than this or less, just know that is definitely in the cards for what's going on right now. So this is just a highly fluid forecast. So what are we looking at? Higher elevations of the Monadnock region up through northern New Hampshire, either mostly rain as you head too far east of here, and a lot of rain in the Connecticut River Valley. You hit the higher elevations of the Monadnocks up through central and northern New Hampshire, 1 to 3 inches, 2 to 5 as you head towards the White Mountains, and there'll be some spots north of that that get a little bit more snow than that. And then from the Connecticut River, we kind of move up gradually until we get kind of right as we head up into the mountains, up as you kind of start to climb in elevation. So 1 to 3 inches for a lot of areas in Windham County and in Windsor County as you get away from the Connecticut River. So an area like Chester, certainly. I think Cavendish fits in this 1 to 3 inch range, maybe 4 in Cavendish. As you head north of that, as you head south of us, because this is like into Wilmington and probably East Dover, certainly. As you head to Dover and you head up the hill, Londonderry, sort of where I am, you start to fit into that 2 to 5 inch range. Again, very tight gradients as to what happens there. You head from Londonderry to Peru. This is close to me, right? You head 5-6 miles up the hill, up in elevation. Some wouldn't be surprised at all if in the center of town in Peru they got 5, 6, 7 inches of snow, while we may only get 2 or 3 inches down here in Londonderry. Again, estimates, guesstimates. And again, I'm not perfect at the terrain, so some of the extrapolate for terrain as well. If you're in a higher elevation in this 1 to 3, right? If you're Glebe or you're in Windham, which kind of would show in the 1 to 3, you're probably actually more in like that 2 to 5, maybe even 4, 6, 7 inches of snow in a place like Windham. You have to do a little extrapolation to get the actual. It's just going to be real close in terms of elevation. So I think areas above 1,500 feet will do best. Certainly areas about 2,000 feet will do really well. It's definitely 6 to 10 along the spine of the greens as we go a little bit further north. Places that you wouldn't expect that will get more out of this than you'd think because of the upslopes on the western side of the mountains. Places like Manchester, wouldn't be surprised if Manchester got 4 or 5 inches of snow. And here in Londonderry, we only got 2 to 3 or 4, right? So we were a couple inches or maybe even 3 or 4 inches less than they get in Manchester. That almost never happens, but it could in this storm. Bennington also probably does better out of this storm, while Brattleboro gets almost nothing. Yeah, so that's sort of big picture. Anything over 5 or 6 inches of this kind of snow, especially with a little bit of wind, and you have to worry about power outages. So essentially, if you're in the darker blue here, or in the purple, then you need to be concerned about power outages. And I would extend that even to the places in blue. If you start to see that you're getting up to the 4, 5, 6 inch range, you got to start worrying about power outages with this kind of snow, especially with the winds that we're going to have. So I would say most of Rutland and most of Bennington County need to be prepared to lose power. And I would extend that over a little bit east as well. Again, everything shifts a couple hours earlier of a changeover, and you can add 5, 6 inches of snow on all of these totals another hour or two later, and everybody kind of ends up with a coating at the end. So it's really a tight forecast, but that's the best I got for you. I don't want to make it seem like I've got more understanding than I really do. Storm details. All rain with a few minor flooding issues through midnight. Rain changes to snow, especially from the spine of the greens and to the west. And changeover starts. I think most of us stay rain until at least 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And then areas, then it kind of west of the greens, it happens from 3 to 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. Right along like where I am in Londonderry, I would expect changeover maybe 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, maybe as early as 5 or 6 though. If you head towards a place like Chester or Springfield, you may never change over, or if you do, it'll be, just as things are kind of wrapping up towards late morning. Chester is probably more like 9 o'clock in the morning. Again, these are all somewhat guesstimates, but yeah, rain changes to snow. That'll have a lot to do with whether you have school or not. I think if you're in Rutland or Bennington County, you have a pretty good chance of no school. As you head further east from those, chances are there, but they diminish. Certainly if you're along the Connecticut River, you should plan to go to school tomorrow. Accumulating snow by daybreak, especially in Rutland and Bennington counties, talked about that already. Heavy, wet snow and strong winds could lead to power outages, again, especially in Rutland and Bennington counties, although I think everybody should be somewhat prepared to lose power. If we get much more than the 5 to 4 to 7 in a widespread kind of way, if we get up towards those 10, 11 inch totals that are possible if we change over a little early, then this becomes a real big concern. So you definitely want to be prepared to lose power for 24 hours if you're in Rutland or Bennington County. Hopefully we don't get 10 inches. That would start to become like, we could be a couple days. So hopefully that does not happen. I don't think it's going to, but it's possible. Eastern portions of Windham and Windsor counties stay mostly rain. A lot of details, a lot of things to think about. I am going to leave you there because I don't want this video to go on too long, but I did want to give you an update on what was going on. I'll be back tomorrow morning, assuming I have power, which I think I will, and assuming I'm not out on some sort of fire call, which is definitely possible if we get heavy wet snow. But assuming all those things don't happen, I'll be back tomorrow morning. We'll look at your work week forecast. The weather gets much quieter for the rest of the week. We don't really have another chance at a big storm until next weekend. Right now, next weekend's storm looks wet, which would not be great the week before Christmas. So we're all kind of crossing our fingers, hoping that that becomes something that looks a little more white. But at the moment, it looks a little wet for next weekend. All right. Thanks for joining me. Like I said, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel before, I would encourage you to do so. Helps make sure you don't miss any of these videos. And if you're interested in supporting the channel in a financial way and getting some of the benefits that happen that way, I do have a Patreon account, and you can check that out. There's a link in the description below that talks about what you get and how you get that. So you can take a look at that if you're interested. All right. Thanks for joining me. I will be back tomorrow morning. Thank you. Oh, and my patrons. forgot to talk about my patrons or show you my patrons. These are my patrons. So yeah, thanks to the patrons. They help support what I do. And certainly I just appreciate all of their help in terms of making this stuff